Okay, hello and welcome to URI's Pre-Health Experience video series. In this episode, we are talking with Drs. Niall Howlett from CMB and Christie Ward-Ritacco from Kinesiology about their work with undergraduate research. So I'm actually going to start with Dr. Howlett. Can you tell us a little bit about your research?
Yes, hi Ali. My lab studies a rare human genetic disease called Fanconi anemia. The incidence rate of this disease is approximately about 1 in 150,000 live births. The disease is characterized by kind of three main constellations of symptoms. The first is individuals are often born with physical birth defects. The second is they're really prone to develop bone marrow failure at a really young age. And the third one is they're really prone to develop specific types of cancers, again, at an atypically early age. So we study the molecular basis of this disease. We study how the Fanconi anemia genes and the Fanconi anemia proteins are regulated and how they function inside of cells. A greater understanding of the genetics and the biochemistry of this disease, not only is it really important for Fanconi anemia in the hopes that it will lead to improved therapeutic approaches to this disease, but we also believe that it's really important for gaining a greater understanding of bone marrow failure and cancer risk in the general population.
Great. That's a great example of some of the fantastic work that's going on in CMB in general. Dr. Ward-Ritacco, can you tell us a little bit about your work in kinesiology?
Sure. So typically my work looks at how behaviors like exercise, physical activity, how those impact successful aging across the lifespan. So we look at exercise, body composition, muscular strength and endurance, muscle quality, and how that contributes to one's ability to function, specifically in middle age and older adulthood. And can we utilize what we know from successful agers to create interventions that can help people to live longer, but also live better? Because when we move the lifespan ahead, we want to make sure we also move the health span ahead. And so we look at all of the predictors of healthy aging and try to figure out how can we incorporate or create interventions that begin in middle age that perhaps will track in older adulthood and keep people alive longer and healthier through that lifespan.
Great. So Dr. Ward-Ritacco, what do you think are some of the important things students can learn from participating in research or other scholarly activities?
Sure. I think healthcare providers are really delivering care that's based on research, right? So, the majority of our recommendations to treat particular conditions or take a particular avenue in the treatment of a condition really comes from trial and error in the scientific arena. And so you need to be able to read that information, synthesize that information, and apply that information. And that's what researchers do every day in their laboratories. And so being able to be a part of that data collection process, the data entry process, the interpretation of that data process, and particularly if you work with, human subjects, it's a chance to practice your communication skills as well, because you're going to have to describe things that they need to do, concepts they might not understand, and that might be part of your job as a clinician as well. And, my type of research would be slightly different than what Dr. Howlett does, with more work in, a more traditional cellular lab. And that work is very important as well, because it can be very conceptual, but if you spend some time with that, it becomes much more realistic and important, and you get a really good understanding of the breadth and the depth of the science that's going on in human health.
Agree completely. So in our lab, there's lots of technical skills that, we hope and anticipate that students will learn. There's very much an independent aspect of a learning process in that too, and that, we expect students to be self-motivated, that they take the opportunity to learn the methods that are important for their development in the lab. And taking that initiative is is an important skill set to develop, right? To take ownership of a particular aspect of a problem. Teamwork skills, right, are actually really, really important too. We would have lots of people from very different backgrounds, be it socioeconomic, cultural, even, different levels of education. We would have postdocs, research associates, undergrads. But essentially, when you're an undergrad in there, you're an integral member of that team. And, I to my detriment, probably, when students come in, I assign them projects and independent research that they have to do the same way as I would assign a postdoc or a research associate independent research. So
questions that I had, which is the level of commitment that you might expect to get from a student who comes to you and asks about research. So somebody comes and says, I can work for you for one semester. Is that going to do the trick, or you're probably going to need more of a commitment?
Yes. Christie, you want to take this one? Yeah.
I was going to say, it generally takes more than one semester to get familiar with the techniques, the data collection methods, and even with my data collection methods that are not nearly as precise or as potentially difficult to gain as Dr. Howlett's, but still understanding how the lab works, what needs to be done, when it needs to get done, how it needs to get done. It's nice to have someone over the course of a year or 2 years during their undergraduate studies so that they become an expert as well. And we want them to be involved enough with this process that they can own a piece of the project, right? And that includes doing data collection, doing data entry, doing data interpretation, and then having the potential to present that information at a regional or national conference. And that's going to require more than one semester of commitment. There's also some flexibility with that commitment, because I often have students sign up, for like 1 credit of independent study, which, requires them to spend 3 hours in the lab. But that could be 3 hours one week, 6 hours another week, 1 hour another week. So you have to be quite flexible with what's going on in the lab, who's coming in, what has to get done, what is the time frame that it needs to be done. So you have to be quite committed, and we need to have students that are looking for a full experience and to really understand the research, and not people who are just looking for one more line on their CV.
That's I've got to add to that. I that's a really important point. And Christie and I would, I'm sure say that we consider ourselves professional researchers, right? And that we have professional labs, and a lot of time, effort, resources, energy, money goes into those labs. And so, what I'm looking for from students really is that they're committed, and the time commitment can vary, right? As Christie said, it might be 1 credit, it might be 3 credits, it might be an honors project. I've had several situations where students have been in the lab for, let's say, maybe 1 or more years, where they don't need any kind of compensation or credit. They're just entirely motivated by the research itself, and they want to be part of the team, and they really enjoy it. And so I suppose the point is, we take it very seriously, and whatever level of commitment somebody is looking for, it's important that the commitment is there. And as Christie says, that they're not looking for just one more thing to put on the CV, right? When people struggle and have difficulties with it is when they don't have the bandwidth to commit, right? Whereby they're so committed to many other things that they say, well, I can come to your lab between the hours of 9 and 10 on a Wednesday and 10 and 2 on a Friday. That doesn't work. So you just need to have enough room and flexibility in your schedule that you may need to drop in on a Friday for only 20 minutes. But if you need to drop in on a Friday for 20 minutes, you have to be there. It's just to make sure that you can commit at whatever level of commitment you say you're going to do, that the commitment is going to be there. Yeah.
What's the best way to approach faculty and to reach out?
Yeah, I would say, The first advice is I would do it early, right? What happens frequently is students might say, I'm a senior, I'm graduating next year, I'm looking for research experience. Generally, that won't work. Again, it takes a lot of time and energy and resources to train a student. We know that the greatest productivity for us and for the student is typically gained from 1 to 2 year commitment, right? So think about it early. Reaching out, I would always encourage, email people, but you probably want to email several faculty members, knowing that everyone, in particular faculty, are extremely busy, and sometimes you might not hear back from a faculty member. That's nothing personal. I think following up is totally acceptable. Maybe following up 2 times is okay, right? But also reaching out to several, because you know that not everyone is going to get back to you, and just to understand that it's not personal. So I would say encourage maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 different faculty members that people might reach out to. And the other piece of advice is to be genuine and be sincere about your interest, and to make it somewhat personalized in terms of, I've read a little bit about your work, I'm really interested in what you're doing. I'd like to become a part of your team, as opposed to, hi, I saw your name somewhere, I'd like to come and work in your lab, right? Just do a little bit of homework, and that's always impressive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree that there has to be a genuine interest from the student in the work that's being done in the lab. So, beyond saying I've just read your bio, I went to PubMed, I looked at a few of your publications, or if they've had interaction with someone else on the lab team, I've spoken with, so-and-so, and they've really enjoyed learning this, that, and the other skill. I think this would help me in the future. But I think the most important thing is that if someone doesn't get back to you immediately, it has nothing to do with the student. It generally has to do with the bandwidth of the faculty member. And I've had plenty of times where I've left that email unread because I plan to go back, and then something comes up and 50 more emails come in. And a month or 2 later, I look back and I'm like, oh goodness, I never got back to that student. So a very kind, gentle reminder is totally okay, as long as it is, polite. And I know you're something along the lines of, I know you're busy, just checking in if perhaps there's any opportunities in your lab. I understand if there are not. Something along those lines. And I think another thing too is you don't have to be tied to your major. Obviously, you've picked a major because you're interested in that area, and the faculty in that major, theoretically are doing work that you enjoy. But I have students from outside of kinesiology work with me, regularly, because they're interested in exercise or its effects or diet. And we do interdisciplinary work. That's kind of the name of the game now to get funding. So having an interdisciplinary lab of students from a number of different majors is also, totally within the realm of possibility. So don't feel like you're tied to those faculty that you have for your core classes.
Yeah, and I think the points Christie made, great points. The other thing I think is that it kind of doesn't matter what research experience you have, does it? It could be, it doesn't maybe even need to be in the sciences, right? It could be any outside the classroom experiential research opportunity. I think can be incredibly beneficial, right? So yeah, again, it can be outside the major, yeah, and it doesn't have to be nuts and bolts of different human diseases. It could be quite varied.
As we've talked about the best way for students to reach out to you, what are some pitfalls you've noticed, or some things that maybe raise red flags for you?
It's the follow-up when I say, I'm available these times to meet, and the person doesn't email back for a week, or comes back and basically has a 30-minute window. And so that shows me that they're overcommitted in other areas. And so this experience is probably not going to be as fulfilling for either of us, because the time availability isn't there. So I would say if you want to make this commitment to research and you have a very full schedule, you're going to need to move something out of the way to add something else.
Right.
Because of that flexibility that Niall has talked about that we need from students sometimes due to the nature of the research projects. Don't count yourself out. I know sometimes undergraduate students feel a little bit intimidated to speak to faculty, but if we didn't like working with students, we wouldn't be in the position that we are at the institution that we are. You know, our teams typically have graduate students and postdocs, potentially doctoral students. And so there's a whole team of a network that is there to help you. And so, you know, that type of experience is important. And even if you come on the team and a new undergrad comes on, you become their mentor as well. So it's more than just getting the research experience. It's seeing how research happens in these particular situations. So don't be intimidated, definitely reach out, make sure you have availability, but think about how this opportunity might affect you in more ways than simply, now I know how to do X, Y, and Z skills.
I think in some ways we're particularly lucky at URI that, you know, students have access to so many excellent labs on campus. And my always kind of encouragement is if you do get the opportunity, you know, take it and run with it and just be really proactive about, you know, trying to push ahead when you're in the lab, you know. Don't sit back, don't wait for instruction, just be enthusiastic and motivated and independent in your approach to it. It's a lot of fun, right? I think all of us who did have that research experience as an undergrad, it really was a transformative experience. Yeah, so
Sure.
I'd say take that opportunity.
And say I still do research that I was introduced to as an undergrad. So, you know, and I didn't think this was a possibility for me. I thought there was, you know, one way I could go with my degree, and it wasn't until I had that research experience that I was like, oh, there's some other avenues here. So the other thing is be open to the possibility, right? Not everyone thinks a PhD might be for them or a career in academia is for them. This might open that door for you. So don't be afraid to, you know, change your mind, you know, about
Sure.
where you might want to go with your education and your career.
Yeah, Bo. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Great to see you guys.